Welcome everyone to this week's video. Today we are on Fish Friday number 120 and we have a good one for you today. Today's fish is extremely popular by anglers. It's super common and one of the most recreationally fished fish in the Gulf of Mexico. Today's fish that we're going to be talking about is the spotted sea trout. Now, the spotted sea trout, or scientific name Cynoskyon nebulosus, again, that is Cynoskyon nebulosus. It is part of the family Scyanidae, which is the drum family, actually. It is not part of the Salmonidae family, the trout family. The reason why it's called the spotted sea trout is because it looks similar in body shape to what a lot of people think trout look like, but it is in fact a drum, and we've covered drum before. The red drum, I think we covered the red drum or the redfish, not entirely sure, but we've covered some of the drums before. So if you can think back to those videos, or if you have any idea, that's actually the same sort of style that this fish has. Body style. It is found along the coast of the southeastern US, think Texas to Florida. That's where it's primarily found, but it's also found up the East Coast up to Virginia. So it'll basically go around Florida and up to Virginia. Very, very rarely you can actually find this as far up in the coast of Massachusetts, but it is almost strictly a United States fish. I don't even believe they get, no, I bet they get down into Mexico. I bet it's fairly common in Mexico waters. I can't imagine why it wouldn't be. So I imagine it's just found all throughout the Gulf of Mexico and then up Florida. If I'm wrong, please correct me in the comments. It is a demersal fish, meaning that it's found on top of the water. That's found in brackish to marine water. So this is staying really, really close to the coast and does actually travel up the river systems to where the tidal influence can reach. As you know, the ocean has tides that wax and wane, or ebb and flow, or wax and wane. I'm not sure. I don't know tides. I don't know marine stuff. But the saltwater actually reaches up into the freshwater rivers, riverine systems that create a saltwater influence that can create very brackish water. So it can be found up in there, but most of the time when you think of these, you're going to think, you know, coastlines, marine water on, you know, like the oyster beds or in the seagrass beds, you know, very, very shallow. In terms of size, it is a medium-sized fish with great photography. You can look like you have an absolute monster, which this is actually a pretty good size. But realistically, you're looking more at like this size fish. You can see this guy's not zooming, he's not far, he's not holding his arms way out, he's kind of holding it there. You get a good idea, and that's about sort of like your average fish, average adult fish. The average weight is going to be somewhere between 0.5 and 1 kilograms, which is 1 to 2 pounds. But fish up to 2.5 kilograms, which is about 5 pounds, those are actually decently common. It's not, even though the average is, you know, 5 times that is not that uncommon. In fact, the world record for this fish is 7.9 kilograms, which is right at 17.5 pounds. I think it's just under 17.5 pounds. So that one was definitely a massive fish. I could not imagine a spotted sea trout with that weighing that heavy out there. In terms of length, you're really looking at about 19 to 37 inches, which I believe is about 100 centimeters to, let's see, probably closer to like 105 centimeters at the max, at the top end of the range, and probably about 55 centimeters on the in the length on the bottom end. So 55 to 105 I think is like kind of your average range. It's a very wide-ranging morphological size characteristic. It's not really that uniform across the minnow. In terms of how to identify these, I mean, if you are in the ocean and you catch something that looks like a trout that has spots on the upper half of the body, it's pretty much a spotted sea trout. I don't really know what you could confuse this with. It's got this dark gray kind of top. It's got this golden hue towards the back. Very, very silver on the underside. Spots are on the dorsal and the caudal fins. Yeah, it's just really kind of bizarre. Well, not bizarre. I don't know what you could find, what you could confuse this fish with. Like most of the other drum family, it does have two dorsal fins. It's got the first dorsal fin, which is very spiny. I believe it's 1, 2, 3. I was going to say 7 to 8. I think it has somewhere between 7 and 9 spines. Pretty hefty spines, by the way. And then the second dorsal fin is usually very elongated and very rectangular, and it usually has one spine at the very front end of that. Then the caudal fin just has spots. It's soft. It's got this sort of squared off tail. And something that I've always liked that I don't believe is an actual characteristic, you can't really tell on this picture, but to me, I always seem to notice a little right here, this little white stripe kind of in the middle of the tail. If you go and look at pictures, on a lot of them, I see a little white stripe that sort of like just extends out in the, well, that's a taxidermy mount. That doesn't count. Live fish. Wow. Of course, the third picture I clicked on proved me wrong, but I feel that that little mark, that little white stripe right there is there more often than not. I could be wrong, but to me, I feel like everyone I physically held in my hands has that little white stripe right in the caudal fin right there. Unlike most other members of the drum family, it does not have barbels. Remember, barbels are those fleshy whiskers that some fish have. Drum usually have chin barbels. The spotted sea trout does not have those. Let's see. It's got this very large mouth and head, very much like a salmon or a trout. So you can definitely see why it's common like that. But what's interesting, if you do have any other questions on what you're catching, look in the mouth. The spotted sea trout has these very, very almost vampire-like canine teeth. Very, very vampire-like, I envision. Right in the front of it's almost like canines or incisors, right at the tip of this upper jaw. All the rest of the teeth are pretty small. They start small at the tip of the lower jaw, and then they start getting larger towards the back. Usually they start small and start getting longer. That's pretty good. And you might be wondering, why does it have these vampire teeth? Well, that actually is a tribute to their diet. So their diet is very much, when they're smaller, they eat a ton of shrimp, crustaceans, hard things. Then as they grow older, their diet starts to shift towards fish, and then they start eating the largest fish that they can possibly catch. There's been multiple studies done in like Texas and Mississippi that show that very large spotted sea trout prefer to feed on mullet, which are a very bony fish, and they'll find the largest mullet they can handle and try to swallow it, up to about 2/3 as large as the trout. So they'll eat something about 2/3 the size that they are. It's absolutely this incredible what they'll decide to eat. And basically what those teeth are for, and they're very strong teeth, they're grabbing a fish or pretty much anything, even when they're younger, shrimp and crustaceans, they're grabbing these things poking hole in the crustaceans, holding onto the fish with those strong canines, then they swallow whole. These are not a fish that rip and tear. They try and swallow their prey completely whole. So just like largemouth bass, there's been numerous examples of spotted sea trout kind of choking on their food. That also leads to my next thing is, because they're so voracious, they're an extremely important recreational fish. I mentioned that at the beginning of the video. These fish are heavily sought after by anglers, myself included. They're incredibly fun, and usually when you get on a school of them, you can get a whole bunch of them. According to the National Oceanic Administration and NOAA, spotted sea trout are actually like the top 10 in the top 10 of species fished for in the United States, out of the entire United States. The statistics showed that from 1993 to 2003, recreational fishermen only in Louisiana, this is only about Louisiana, but in those 10 years, fishermen in Louisiana harvested more than 6 million spotted sea trout each year, meaning only in one state 6 million sea trout were collected. That is absolutely bizarre. Along the East Coast, North Carolina, Virginia, more than 500,000 were caught each year between 2005 and 2008. So you think about it, you got that one state, then you got these other two states, 6 million here, another 500,000 here. That's not including all the other states. Florida has a heavily used spotted sea trout recreational fishery. Texas does as well. You have to add all these up, and you probably have close to 10 million fish, probably on the lower end, recreationally fished each year. It's absolutely bizarre, and that's just the recreational fishery. There is actually a very small commercial fishery, but it's not even close to the amount of recreational fishing that happens. And you might be asking, how can they do this and not have population problems? Well, younger females can release up to 100,000 eggs, but larger females can release up to 1 million, and they can start reproducing very quickly. This is a fish that's its life history is based on very high turnaround. The average fish lives like 5 years, I believe. So they're evolved to have a lot of babies very quickly and grow fast, which is a good recreational fishery fish. There is small evidence that spotted sea trout could be on the decline in some areas, but I'm not incredibly worried about the spotted sea trout personally. But for the interesting fact that we're going to end the video on, if you catch spotted sea trout, I highly advise to eat them. They are delicious. One of the best fish I've ever had. I know I say that about pretty much every fish I've eaten, but fish is just really tasty. But if you catch a spotted sea trout, do not be alarmed if you are cleaned it and you see actual worms along the fish's backbone. Some trout, and when I say some, more than you think, they actually have worms embedded in the flesh along the backbone. They're like spaghetti worms or something. Do not be alarmed. Those worms are actually the larval stages of a tapeworm. You can eat these worms. I would highly advise not to. I would probably slice those worms out, just cut the flesh away. But those worms cannot actually survive in humans, even if you eat them raw, even if you don't cook them. Please don't eat your fish raw unless it's properly prepared. That is such a good way to get problems. But even if you eat spotted sea trout raw, you're not going to get these worms. And because these worms, the spotted sea trout is like a middleman. These worms are the larval stage when they can only reach maturity in sharks, meaning that a shark has to eat the spotted sea trout, and that's actually how these larval worms become full-blown tapeworms. So it's just kind of like that little middleman. Those larval worms are hitching a ride on the spotted sea trout until a shark comes along and eats it. I thought that was a really cool adaptation. But thank you guys so much again. I really appreciate it. Hope to see you again. If I don't, please be safe. Have a great day. Please leave a like, comment, subscribe. If you do, I'd really appreciate it. Hope to see you again. Sorry I was not forward thinking and realized that this was the Friday that was closest to Halloween. I should have done a spooky fish, but I gave you a cool fish instead, and one that's very delicious. But thank you guys so much again. Take care of yourselves, take care of your loved ones, and peace.